This is the Blairing Out with Eric Blair show, and today I'm pleased to have punk rock legend from the Adolescence, D.I., and the Radolescence, Casey Royer. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks, Eric, for having me. It's my pleasure.
How did you end up joining the Detours?
The guys in the Detours kind of like started hanging around parties that we were playing, high school parties, and just, after football games, we'd all go to somebody's house or someplace. And we we all met kind of at gigs and parties because they went to a different high school district than we did. So they started interacting with me and Rick, and we all became friends, and they were a little crazy, a little wild like us, like just, throwing stuff, tripping people, just doing stupid stuff, like they're really wild, They just asked me and Rick to be in the band with them. So we said, okay, because we were messing around with some DI stuff, just, rock and Social Distortion kind of had fallen apart at that point. And we just started playing with, Gordon Cox and Mike Kerber and Jeff Beans. And he played left-handed upside-down bass. He's probably the reason I wrote, Richard hung himself. But, yeah, the Detours guys are really cool dudes. They lived in La Habra, and we were on the other side of the hill in Fullerton. And so we just started getting together, and we started playing these shows. In fact, the Detours did a first recording with me on drums and Rick on guitar, and then Gordon, Mike, and Jeff. We recorded Amoeba, Falling Out, OC Life, and The Saint before the Adolescents were together, or DI was together. Actually, DI was together, but we were just practicing in our living room, writing silly songs like I Hate Surfing in HB and stuff like that, which became famous songs. But we just ended up just hanging around each other, and Gordon got these, there's some few clubs around, the little, we'd rent halls, like an Elks Lodge. We'd rent an Elks Lodge and set up our stuff. And then we just ended up having gigs, and the gigs were explosive. I mean, really intense, fast, really crazy topic matters like Pee, a song called Pee, drinking the wine from my bladder makes her feel all right inside. Just weird, crazy off the wall stuff that didn't even make sense. And so that happened for a while, and that was cruising and stuff. And then it just kind of fell apart, and we just went to the Adolescence. And then, I don't know, I guess the Detours just kind of fell apart. I think those guys went to school or something, or, something just kind of merged away. And then the Adolescents got immediate love from, the scene and interest from record labels.
What is great about the Agnew brothers? You got Rick, you got Alfie, you got Frank, and you've played with all of them.
So much talent in just, full-on mechanics, playing their instruments, as well as writing songs, as well as having good souls and good outlooks on things, even though sometimes there's a little negative approach to a positive thought. They've got that kind of gift. And Frank and Rick were fairly close to the same age, with about 3 years apart, I think, and maybe 4. And then Alfie was the youngest, Alfie Agnew. We called him Fetus. And I remember when he was 14, he was mowing lawns to get his first Marshall stack, or first amp, right? Me and Rick are driving to practice, somewhere, and we're seeing Alfie mow the lawn. So they've always been creative. Rick probably lit the fuse on the Agnew creativity because he just liked instruments. He just was interested in guitar. I mean, Rick learned how to play guitar by watching cartoons. He'd watch Looney Tunes, he'd all those songs that were given to us on, cartoons and the social media when we were kids. He would just simulate that on guitar and got to be talented and started just applying himself by writing songs when we had that platform to do that. Because that's, I think, when we all started writing songs was when punk started. So we started writing punk songs, so we had all the mechanics down. We just all of a sudden flowed right into it. So Rick was a pioneer. He was a drummer. First, he was a drummer, guitar player. He was a drummer for the Detours before I was in the Detours. So Rick and Frank just ended up being kind of musical brothers. And then Alfie was just looking up to their brothers and just followed right in the footsteps. I mean, those guys can play guitar extremely well. And they're phenomenal. There's a movie being made about the Agnews right now it's called Luna Films. Gabe Zavala is doing it, and it's about the adolescents and the Agnew family, and they cast kids as us. I mean, there's cast like, me and Tony and Rick and Steve. There's kids that look just like us in the movie, the Agnew movie. And then there's a DI portion in that movie where like there's kids are in the DI scene at a party. And it's actually going to be a motion picture called The Agnews, an American Family, maybe it's called, or something like that. And it's amazing. I mean, it's categorizing our scene through motion pictures, and that's pretty. I can't believe it. I mean, the kids that look like us. It is cool.
Hey, what do you remember about the first time you heard K-Rock disc jockey Rodney Bingenheimer playing the second Adolescence demo on his show?
It was incredible because not only had this almost like legitimized our existence, because Rodney, I don't know how these people had these visions, because they were older than us when we were kids starting this thing or whatever. And it was amazing. It was incredible, because when you get the airways on the radio, it's almost like you get a television series kind of deal. And it was like, making our scene actually make sense. And like Germs, Go-Go's, Adolescence, Black Flag, Fear, are all in the underground top 10 playlist, right? Because it was like a Billboard playlist, but it was his own like underground kind of like philosophies and company and in existence. So when we'd hear it, I remember it was on Sundays at 11 o'clock at night, just the dirt ball, the nosebleed section of the baseball game, right? Just 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night on Sundays when everybody's not going to be listening. And it was just amazing. Like K-Earth 106.7. Is that what it is?
It's KROQ 106. Yeah, 106.7.
So Rodney was our leader, because he actually just realized that our scene was something that was in a reality and growing. He must have been a visionary, because you never invest in things that are going to disappear. And Rodney was into the Monkees, he was into the Go-Go's, a lot of like really happy stuff. And he had his Rodney on the Rock top 20, and people would vote for what songs, and Amoeba held the #1 position on K-Rock for about 2 months. And it was just incredible, because it actually made us a reality. If we had our own radio station, our own because he was based out of Los Angeles or Pasadena, so he would be able to advertise for the concerts that we had at the Whiskey and the Starwood, the Club Lingerie and the Palladium. So we actually had an underworld that we could actually work with, because out of society's eyes completely, our own like self-existing scene. So when Rodney Bingenheimer just buddied up with us, and Rodney made the very first Rodney on the Rock album, Volume 1, it was on. We had an actual album that was in the stores, and we had the radio station and all these clubs that we'd play with all of our friends that weren't anybody else's friends. We were like kind of outcasts, and like all of a sudden we became the most threatening, real kind of entity that hadn't really busted into the mainstream at all. And it was like Rodney was our hero, and he was so funny. His voice was so kind and kind of odd, and his look was just genius. And he was like amazing. That he was in that handful of a few people that really made punk happen in California, Southern California, because K-Rock was a major radio station at that time. I don't know how they let him in there. One time I remember we went in there for an interview on K-Rock with Rodney interviewing us, the Adolescents, and we all rolled in there and stuff. I'm never going to forget, I knocked over a whole big jar of nuts all over the control panel. And I'm all like, oh, that's nuts. And they're all like going, oh my God, these kids are all drunk and just messing around. But yeah, Rodney was the man. Rodney was the king.
Describe the most out of control OC parties that the Adolescents ever played.
We were in Placentia, California, and we were playing. It was Adolescence Agent Orange show. And we were playing, like back in the day, there was all kinds of orange fields all over Orange County. There's like neighborhoods and then a full like block of orange trees. So the police used to love to find our parties and just like and bust them, make everybody go home. You know, just go home, because we'd park up and down these streets and like 1,000 people would be in this like neighborhood, right? So we're at this party, and in the backyard, it was a big backyard, and then the orange fields went off out of the back of the backyard, just like a mile or two. So the police ran in. They used to run in pretty heavily. They used to have a bunch of squad cars, and all of them would jump out at the same time with flashlights and just pretty much grab you if you wouldn't run to your car and just go, you know. So you just would run, you know, and go. The party was broken up. The cops like, this isn't gonna happen, punk rock and all that stuff. So I remember we all ran into the orange fields and armed ourselves with fruit. And like the police were running around trying to catch us, but the police had flashlights. So you know where the fruit would fly? At the flashlights. So we had these cops, we actually, they retreated. The cops retreated because we were pummeling them with oranges. So many oranges were hitting these cops, or bouncing off them, and they just ended up we ended up fighting, you know, running off into the fields, firing oranges at them, and they retreated and left. And that was a victory. And I think we even played a little bit more. That was so dumb. But yeah, that was a good one. That was a good like little riot. Little riots are fun sometimes, you know, a little energy, a little exhilaration. There was a great riot at the Olympic Auditorium with DI and GBH, I think, or maybe Exploited, to where their cops were beating people up in the parking lot, and punk gangs were beating each other up at the same time. Like, you know, like there was good fights. Like the cop would be grabbing a guy, and this guy was kicking this other guy in the head that was in another punk gang. And it was just kind of like mass hysteria. It was kind of crazy. Good Palladium riots were pretty good. There was a riot at a place called Basie's Hall that was kind of a great riot, where they were chasing kids out of the front of the club. This is in LA, and people would run and get in their cars, and the police would just billy club break all the windows in the car. Just break the windows and then go off to the next and chase the next kids that are running around. I mean, it was pretty aggressive, you know, moves on the police part, because they wanted to extinguish the non-law abiding citizens, which was us. And they had their work cut out for them, because the punks had between Rodney Bingenheimer and all of our records and all of the new generation of like media, like Channel 7 and, you know, Ion 2 on the Town, all these people would be feeding our side of the game. And so it was a pretty good like standoff for a few shows, you know. Cuckoos Nest was really good at like making the police upset. I remember Jerry Roach one time had a fake show. He's all, okay, we're going to tell everybody that we're playing, Fear's playing, Fear, the Adolescence, the Circle Jerks, and Circle One, and Black Flag, and, you know, made a flyer. So the cops roll up like 20 squad cars deep, all riot gear, all standing in the front of the Cuckoos Nest, and no one showed up. And it was the biggest joke on the Costa Mesa Police Department ever. They were so mad at that, they tried to close the club down, you know, violations, this and that, trying to make stuff up, because he's actually called their bluff, and he just said, hey, there's nobody coming. You guys are idiots. You cops are idiots. Look at you. Ha, police oppression, freedom of speech, yelling at, you know, that was a pretty amazing like standoff, and that was pretty cool. And they just left. There was no fights or nothing. In fact, there was only a handful of people there. I mean, I think they were closed. It was a good one.
Specific life-changing moments that you remember from your time at the Cuckoo's Nest?
The Cuckoo's Nest, some of the most amazing things happened there, between punks fighting punks, and there was a cowboy bar next door called Zuby's, and they used to antagonize the punks, and it was just kind of a little vendetta against each other. I remember times when the cops would like roll in, and everybody would roll under the cars. Like, you just roll under the car, and then you'd hide under the cars, and the cops would search the area and just try to bust people. I remember one time these undercover cowboys hit me up. I think I said this in another interview, where they were pretending they were cool cowboys, and then they all of a sudden pulled out badges. They were undercover police cowboys trying to investigate the punk rock scene. But that was a pretty great battlegrounds, the Cuckoo's Nest.
Did you ever meet any special girls at the Cuckoo's Nest that you ended up dating for a while?
Oh, many girls at the Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, even had a cat fight over me once. It was Kirby fighting Charlene. It was rad. They're all, a cat fight, punk chicks fighting you. It's pretty cool. But, you know, no, there wasn't that much, you know. All the girls were pretty happening. They're pretty cute, you know. They played the kind of like the cute, like say in like a 50s movie where the girl's kind of like the tough guy's chick, you know. It was kind of like, they were kind of like that kind of girls, not that boisterous, you know, unless they're fighting over me, of course. But pretty much just plain, happy people. Girls, you know, they didn't really cause any problems. It was pretty fun, you know. Just regular, you know, Southern California girlfriend, boyfriend kind of scenarios like you would, you know, expect to have in any kind of like subculture. It was pretty functional.
What was your relationship like with Jack Grisham from T.S.O.L?
Jack Gresham, T.S.O.L, is one of the most amazing people I've ever met. I've known Jack since like the early 80s, maybe even before that, because T.S.O.L was from Long Beach and we were from Fullerton, so the Cuckoos Nest facilitated all of our bands, like the Vandals. All of us would just go to that place and we got to meet each other. And we got to be really good friends. Jack was kind of a wild man. He was hard to really connect with, like Todd Barnes, rest in peace, Todd, was good friends with me. And we used to smoke pot together, and I was the drummer. He was the drummer. You know, we used to hang around, talk to each other, and have fun and stuff, and we ended up playing gigs together and having fun. Jack, wild man, out of control, would dress in dresses to get into fights, just to make people, like, just say something to him, and he would laugh while he's just slapping him, knocking him down and stuff. He was really a deranged guy. It was fun, because those guys are all really big. The TSOL guys are 6'2", they're all tall. So they would have the ability to just command, and then you throw a punk rock thing, you know, band at them, and it was great. It was pretty out of control. Jack was really smart, really great entertainer, still playing to this day with, you know, TSOL. I mean, the adolescence played with TSOL not too long ago, and Jack got on stage, and he said something really incredible. He said, "It's great to be here with Rick and Casey again. I saw pictures of us when we were kids, and we look so weird. This is a great gig. It's great to be playing with Rick and Casey again." And I'm all like, wow, the brotherhood after all this stuff, all the gigs, all the years and hours and miles of travel. Jack walks up and just brings up that me and Rick are playing our gig together, and how we're just like still like children at heart. And it's just amazing. It's just funny, because like the punk thing was a youthful kind of thing. And between Jack and all of us that are like singers, we all just kind of have fun and laugh at it all.
Do you remember any specific Jack moments that you were around or involved in back in the day?
One time, DI, TSOL, playing at a place called Palookaville. Big, huge hall in Santa Cruz. Huge crowd. The crowd's going crazy. Everybody's just like the soundboard. It's like a 24-channel, huge system, like bazillion watts, just lights and everything. And then we're all just like TSOL. Everybody's chanting, "Oh yeah, TSOL." And Jack goes like this, "Watch this." And I'm all like, oh, what's he gonna do now, right? Because he's just, you know, he's just such an insider of craziness. It's great. So Jack goes up to these like, the main breaker panel of the whole building, and just turns off all the 100-amp breakers of the whole building. You could just hear see all the lights go off, and the power just goes, doo. You could hear the soundboard just turn off, and it was just, everybody was in the dark, and everybody starts screaming and stuff, and just going, ah, and people are pushing each other around, because nobody could see anything. It was pitch black in there. And then he turned it back on. He's all, "That was good, huh?" Runs on stage. That was pretty minimal, but it was a fun time.
Ever in a situation where you were in danger of getting pummeled by people and one of the other people from the punk rock scene protected you?
In 1984, there was a show at the Wilmington Longshoremen's Hall or something. It was a giant, just empty place. Dead Kennedys, DOA, DI, and a couple other bands. Complete riot to where like the cops were throwing tear gas. Punks didn't have anywhere to go. They were actually climbing on top of each other's bodies. And the stage got pushed, and this bodies pushed the stage up into the top. And then a couple bouncers were seeing all this chaos go on. People are getting caught on the doors and screaming, getting pushed out like a Play-Doh factory. Bodies are just rolling on top of each other. So these bouncer guys told me and my girlfriend at the time, and the guys in the band, go down the hall and hide in the very back little like, you know, alcove in the back behind this thing. So we hid back, you know, we went back there and we kind of hid back there, and then everybody else just got beaten and chased, and then we hear the police going, come out of there. We made back there, come out of there. And then we walked out, and there was cops, a line of cops, and we walked between them, and then there was the bouncer guys that got us to the safe spot. And then they just gave us like, you know, wow, thumbs up, you know, like, get out of here kind of thing. And the cops all stood there in the riot gear, and they didn't hit us or anything. We just were escorted out the side. But these bouncer guys just kind of saved the band, because everybody was getting virtually beaten and really injured pretty well at this Wilmington show. I know a lot of people remember that show. Helicopters, it was out of control. And I think Jello Biafra wouldn't stop playing. I think the Dead Kennedys went out, the mayhem was going on. We're still, you know, government flu or something was going on, right? Just really a classic. That was a classic. That was a good riot.
Do you think you had arrived as a star when Posh Boy's Robbie Fields presented the Adolescents with gold singles at the Starwood in LA as a result of the song Amoeba off the 1980 Rodney on the Rock compilation becoming a hit?
You know, when that happened, we did have a sense of accomplishment, because in our own little underground world that was extremely underground, I mean, this was just neighborhood bands at that point, you know, actually conquering and charging, you know, in our scene, we did have a sense of empowerment. We felt good. We felt great. Robbie handed us our gold records for being like the #1 song, a teen hit or something on K-Rock, and it was kind of geeky, but it was kind of in our world. It was everything. It was like amazing. Tony didn't think it was everything. He took his record and just broke it over his knee, threw it in the crowd, and we started rip it up and played. It was out of control. He wishes he had that record to this day, though, but I'm sure he wishes he hadn't thrown it in the crowd. But when Posh Boy did that, because he was working in unison with Rodney Bingenheimer to put out the punk rock album, Rodney on the Rock Volume 1. It was on a Posh Boy record label. So Posh Boy, being an English guy, you know, was seeing a lot of like things happening in England, like a little prior to it exploding here. So he had the insight and the knowledge, and Rodney had the bands and the music and the connection with all of us being friends and meeting up at these gigs. I mean, Rodney would come to our gigs, you know, and just be hanging around. You know, we'd just all be funny rock and roll kids having fun, just barking out whatever political things we wanted to, because we could.
So how did the LA punk scene differ from the Orange County punk scene?
Well, like the punk scene in Orange County and the punk scene in LA were extremely different, but in a lot of ways the same. We had the same basic fundamental beliefs, the same weaponry to attack, you know, our society with our guitars and our insight and our wit. And we were a little more suburbanites down in Orange County compared to like the big city of Los Angeles. Those guys up there, like X, all those dudes that were like in the bands, had a different environment. Their city life was different than, like, say, in Orange County, where we're a little more spread out. We had the beach, we had Disneyland, we had a little more of a softer kind of existence. And so it reflected in the way we ended up. We were kids that went to Disneyland. Maybe up in LA, they'd go to a Dodger game or something more like a little more mature of a city environment, you know, to where like it was a little more jaded, a little more tough, a little more, you know, it was more homeless people, a little more like big city kind of corruptions and like scenarios, to where we were planned out kind of like communities, you know, where we came from. And so the concepts that the LA punks adheres to the way we were in our minds, but it was so different in geographical situations. Like if there was you couldn't really have a punk rock club in Orange County in that day, because the parents and the mayor and the city and everybody would just be concerned, that this club had people drinking, and it was in some like Anaheim suburb, strip mall. And then in Los Angeles, it would be like, you'd be more lost in the shuffle. The bands had been going on the Sunset Strip. It was a little more of an aged environment. So that kind of music was a little different than our Orange County music because of just the interaction of like what was going on around us in our different areas.
Did you hang out with Exene? Did you know John Doe? Did you hang out with these people? Did you have any moments with them?
You know, the LA punks, we pretty much just hung around like at gigs. We didn't really go to each other's houses, but I remember hanging around like, you know, X, John Doe, Exene, Darby Crash, you know, Lorna, everyone, you know, Pat. We'd all be at these gigs like they were like a party. So I got to meet these people on a social level, and they accepted us being, you know, Orange County kind of like, you know, wet behind the ears kind of kids, and they were really, really good to us. I can't believe how nice that this scene was, you know, more of a hardened environment than we were coming from, because we were still young. We were really young, and then when you go to, you know, Los Angeles and play like the Starwood, and there's like, you know, it's a sellout crowd and people are going crazy and everybody's drinking and starting fights and stuff. It was a big culture shock compared to where we had come from and what we had learned growing up. So all those people kind of took us under their wing and just accepted us, and it was a great thing. It was a great thing because we looked up to those people because they were a little older than the Adolescents, maybe about 2-3 years older, and like Fear, Black Flag, they were on a roll. Like when we were kind of entering the LA scene from Orange County, it was only a couple of years when this all happened, but we could have gotten beat up and chased out of there, but we weren't. We didn't. You know, they were all really good, dysfunctional people in their own genre up in Los Angeles. Even though it was close, it was like going to a different country for us. And we learned real fast how to get along and how to dodge bullets, so to speak.
Is it true that the Adolescents opened for the Germs' final show on December 3rd, 1980 at the Starwood? And if so, what did you think of Darby Crash, and did you know him personally?
You know, I didn't really know Darby that personally. I saw him quite a bit at gigs. At concerts, he would just be very, 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 you know, inebriated, like Richtering on just blackout kind of like situations. In fact, that gig that you're talking about, I think he got taken away on a gurney by an ambulance because he slashed his chest open. He like took a knife and put a good gash across here, instantly bled out all his clothes bloody red, and just was all like drunk or on something, and he just, you know, fell down, and the ambulance came and took him out. So that was kind of an interesting thing to like see somebody do, you know, because, you know, he was a little self-destructive, and but he was a nice guy, you know. When he was just talking to you, he was really nice, normal, kind of like a high school persona dude at a party, you know, just happy. But one of the best bands in the world was the Germs, I might say. Big influence on us, big influence. The very first What We Do Is Secret album, amazing, amazing. It was almost the most punk thing there was at the time. I think the Germs really, man, Germs, Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, right there. Darby Crash was a genius.
How did the deal with Lisa Fancher's Frontier Records come about for the Adolescents?
The Adolescents like started off with Eddie Joseph, our manager, and he started like giving us gigs here and there, and the scene was growing. We had got great media coverage. So we were playing at the Starwood up in Hollywood, and a gal, Lisa Fancher, approached us and said, "Do you guys ever think about, you know, doing an album?" Or, you know, and we really hadn't been paying attention to that, you know, doing a record or anything. We just wrote the songs for fun, and it was just it. We weren't going to be rock stars. We weren't trying to be anything really, but just ourselves and have fun, because it was like playing a sport kind of to us. You know, there was no real, you know, game plan. So Lisa came up and asked us if we'd like to be on a record. She'd pay for the recording and give us some money and work out a contract or whatever. We didn't really know, you know, what she was talking about at that time. So, and she's been a great girl to us through the whole existence of all the music. But she came up to us it was a sellout crowd at the Starwood, and asked us if we wanted to do that. And we said, yes, we will. Well, sure, why not? She took us to Sun Valley, California, you know, up in the valley, San Fernando Valley, a place called off Penrose Street, and a place called Perspective Sound, I think it was, with Tom Wilson. Mm-hmm. Tom Wilson was working on the Roseanne show, doing audio for Roseanne series. And that's where Penelope Spheres was doing casting for Roseanne too when she made Suburbia. Boy, am I getting off the base or what? So Lisa Fancher came and approached us and stuff and said she's got a company. She's going to call it Frontier Records, and we're going to just be in a band with a record deal. And would that be cool? And we just didn't really realize, didn't ever set that in our sights, but we agreed, and we went to Penn, up in Sun Valley, did the first Adolescence record. She put us up for 2 days in an apartment, all of us, 5 of us. I think there was a couple friends there too. And we went to this place across the railroad tracks 2 days in a row just to track. So we did that, and then she said, I'm going to put out a few bands on a punk rock record label, and you guys are going to be one of the bands on it. The other bands are, there were 6 bands on her roster that she put out on her first wave of Frontier Records releases. And those were the Adolescence record, Circle Jerks record, Wild in the Streets, T.S.O.L., Dance With Me, Suicidal Tendencies, and China White. And those were the 6 albums that were all lumped together on like Adolescence, You'll Flip, was the very first promo picture with Ed Culver, a famous photographer, took it, of that kid doing a flip I think it was at the Stardust Ballroom, Adolescence Fear Show. So that was the beginning of all of it. Because that's when she finally lumped those bands together, and the Jerks and Suicidal. All of us were in T.S.O.L. All of us had really good, strong first albums. And those albums she just went with. I remember the tour poster was wonderful. It had the Circle Jerks guys skanking between all the different records. And it was just really incredible. It was like a lot of fun. And she... and that's how it started. We just went with that, and she just put out the first one, and that we all kept playing the gigs. At that point, we're on kind of like a circuit. The bands were all lumping together, like Black Flag, Adolescence, The Cramps, and all these things, and all these clubs started facilitating our scene finally after a lot of tough battling between the police and club owners battling the police, everybody battling everybody. So at that point, everybody started uniting in our own kind of underground world still. There was clubs, and then the Damned, the Ramones, all these bands from all over the world start coming to Southern California, playing these clubs that we had, like the Cuckoos Nest and all these things, and it was on. It was completely in full motion at that point. The police were kind of backing off. The club owners watched their deal a little bit better so that no one got hurt, up security, and just figured out what bands were bad, what bands would have fights, and what bands to book, what bands not to book. And it became kind of more of a real kind of underground, accepted kind of music scene at that point. And record sales weren't great because it was still kind of saying a lot of things that were negative and that weren't really ready for the music-friendly radio airwaves. You can't say, we destroy the family. You'd rather listen to the Bee Gees because your mom had the Bee Gees on your radio. So it was a struggle.
The photograph for Group Sex, for the Circle Jerks Group Sex album cover. So tell me the story starting from the morning that you got up to and how you got there and what you remember about your interactions with the other punk icons that were there.
Okay, I think that was at the San Pedro Skate Park in South Bay. It was where the Group Sex Circle Jerks album cover was taken by Ed Culver. And a bunch of bands played in the big bowl. And Adolescence played. It was Circle Jerks played. It was pretty good. It was pretty out of control. I think Circle One played. And we all just gathered in the bowl for a photograph. It happened to be the famous one from the Group Sex record. And I'm on that one, picking my nose. Silly me. But we're all standing there, the guys in China White, the guys in the Adolescence. There's people from all of our scene. Michael Exhead, that was in the Decline of Western Civilization movie. That was another movie that was really great. But that San Pedro Skate Park, I went with my friend Daryl, and his buddy Gary drove from Orange County up to the skate park, punk rock show, and we never thought that graphic would be so famous. But I did get to be in it, and it was kind of a fun time. Really, I remember this one kid was getting chased around by these guys that wanted to beat him up, and he was so scared, and he was just falling down, and those guys were all like just pushing him down, antagonizing him. You know, it was kind of an abrupt situation. I remember the Adolescents played in that same bowl that they took the picture at, the Jerks picture, and the pit was brutal.
What is important about Edward Culver as a photographer, and what was your relationship like with him?
You know, Ed Culver was a friend of ours since the very beginning. He was at all the gigs, taking pictures, documenting all this stuff. He was an LA guy, and we were in Orange County, and he got to be really good friends with us because we were kind of kooky, you know, we're kind of silly kids, you know, and he was kind of like, had that kind of persona, but he was like 6'4", and we called him the Viking. And he was like, he would take pictures, and really, he was really close with the Germs and X and all those people because they were up there in his zone, you know. So when he got to meet us, he was taking pictures of us, archiving like all the punk at that time, and then ended up just friending the Adolescents really heavily and stuff. We'd go to his house and stuff, and we'd just go up there and just hang out with him, because Ed was like really a cool friend. And he was a vital component in our scene, because when you get people documenting a scene, it makes it more real. And so he was grabbing these pictures and using these pictures. I mean, he took almost like 80% of the album covers of all the punk bands that there were. Germs, Red Hot Chili Peppers, you know, there's like 100 bands that he did the album covers for. So he was like a kingpin in our scene, and our scene was kind of small at that point. You know, it wasn't a major collection of all these, you know, people that were like creating stuff. It was just like a few key people that were like, you know, Bingenheimer, Jerry Roach, Ed Culver, that were just all kind of fragmentally putting together their support, and it all came together at once, and it actually worked. And now Ed's got one of the most famous books out there called Blight, At the End of the Funnel. It's just as, oh, you're not going to believe it. It's got like backstage pictures of the Vandals, the Circle Jerks, Black Flag. Did all the album covers for those guys. Ed Culver is pretty much one of the key factors in our scene.
How would you describe Ed's personality and working with him?
Ed is silly. He likes comedy. He likes saying jokes. Like, I was an only child, so I was weaned on, like, you know, Bill Cosby and George Carlin and Cheech and Chong and all these comedy things. Ed was just like that. He loved to laugh. He was a funny, happy guy. In the Adolescents, we were silly as it gets. We were silly. I mean, we're a silly band of dudes. So Ed was just like us. I mean, he loves to tell jokes. You can't get away from Ed without having him tell you 20 jokes that are good. And he is just such a great spirit that he appreciated that freedom of the punk scene, just to be himself, you know, just to be what he wanted to be without being judged by anybody. And he just happened to take some of the best pictures that are ever and will ever and can ever be taken ever again. You know, he's just a really, like, man, Ed Culver's incredible.
The Blairing Out Show.